Okay, welcome everyone to Transforming Asset Management with AI, Insights, Trends, and the Road Ahead. Before we get started, we need to give the normal disclosure. Ackerman Associates PLLC is registered with the National Association of State Board of Accountancy as a sponsor of the continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. Each participant must listen for at least 50 minutes and attempt to answer 3 out of 4 polling questions to be eligible for a CPE credit. 1 CPE credit is equal to 50 minutes of approved learning. We will email the CPA certificate in the next few days to eligible participants. And without further ado, with that now being done, just want to take the time and introduce ourselves. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues. Amber, why don't you get us started off if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself?
Thank you. I'm Amber Allen, and I serve as the General Counsel and EVP of Fairview, and I'm also the President of Fairview Cyber. Fairview provides comprehensive compliance support services to registered investment advisors. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Amber. Ashmita?
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I run globally Linedata's AI and analytics solutions and services. In this role, I'm in charge of our product strategy related to AI, artificial intelligence, and including generative AI, and the rollout of these services across both our internal as well as external clients.
Hamid?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I'm Hamid, Chief Information Security Officer at Ackerman Associates. For those who may not know, not be familiar with, Ackerman Associates is a trusted and award-winning provider of private investment, fund audit, tax, and advisory services, specialized in alternative investments. Our firm leverages cutting-edge technology and deep industry expertise to support huge funds, hedge funds, private equity firm, and other investment vehicles with comprehensive back-office solutions. We believe in adapting to new technologies and AI to streamline fund operations, enhance compliance, and drive efficiency from investment managers. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. And for everyone, I'm Jonathan Hinkley. I run our global services business for Linedata. We are a software and services company for the asset management, both the traditional finance as well as alternative space. Without further ado, let's jump into it. We have a lot of great questions and a lot of insights to share with you. Amber, I think why don't we get kicked off with you? How is your company leveraging AI today, and how did you get started with it?
Sure. So we use AI for a variety of purposes, both using tools that we've created here internally and by taking advantage of other AI tools and platforms. We started using an off-the-shelf product to make redundant tasks more efficient. And from there, we developed a proprietary AI product to assist with various different tasks that we're working on regularly, one of which is vendor due diligence reviews. And so the tool that we use is multi-purpose, and it enables us to efficiently summarize SOC reports, for example, review vendor due diligence questionnaires and compare the responses to the ideal response that we've set up. And we rolled it out thoughtfully and slowly to make sure that we were addressing any security risks, and we're continuing to add on features.
Thanks for that. Ashmita, would you mind taking everybody through what we're currently doing at Linedata?
Sure, happy to. So at Linedata, we are developing AI solutions in 3 main areas. First of all, of course, we are developing these bespoke customized solutions to help our clients automate their mundane tasks and mitigate risks. Secondly, we are also as John mentioned, as a software firm, we are also embedding these augmented intelligence, so to say, within our products that's widely available across our a huge client base. And finally, being a sort of an in-house adopter of this technology too, a lot of our internal employees and groups within the firm are leveraging AI to make their day-to-day life more efficient. So, 3 different areas, but what I would also like to highlight that our use of AI is not just recent, right? It's not after Gen AI, which I think a lot of firms started using now. We started our machine learning or AI journey almost 9 years ago through building of our traditional predictive analytics types of solutions. And that has already enabled a lot of our clients to achieve huge savings on the operational side of their workflows and processes. And now they are advancing and maturing to more generative side of the use cases, which is again bringing in a whole lot of other benefits.
Yeah, thanks, Ashmita. And I'll just add to that. I think one of the things we want to do is contextualize how we're seeing it in our clients and in our colleagues, and what benefits people are seeing. Certainly, we've migrated from the theoretical, will this work or not, to can we trust it or not, to now we're getting into seeing a lot more production level implementations of it. And a lot of it, I would say, is really on that repetitive rote processes, where we're starting to see some pretty good ROI on those investments, where we're saving, right? I know just anecdotally, on a reconciliation piece that we're doing, we're seeing something in the nature of about 30% savings of time for across the board as we're implementing this in that task. So there is definitely some tangible components to it. There's still a lot of firms that are out there that are on the wait and see. There's a lot of really excited followers, but they're waiting to see the full confirmation piece of it. Within that, let's talk about, right, how do different sizes of firms, how do they get started, right? What are we seeing out in the marketplace? Ashmita, why don't you get us started with that?
Sure. Yeah, this is a very common consideration for a lot of our clients, and also internally when I talk to internal business groups about leveraging this technology. So the first thing we always recommend is start with the problem, right? What is the challenge you're trying to solve? So because AI is just another means to an end, at least. Don't go looking for a nail when you have the hammer, but it's like, where is the problem and what are you trying to achieve? The second thing we go from there is, once you've identified the problem, look at, do you have the right data available to address those issues? Do you have the right ownership? I mean, for a lot of firms these days, data is the biggest concern, right? And with AI, garbage in, garbage out, we all know that. So it is very important to identify and make sure that the data that is relevant for that particular use case, is it clean? Is it accurate? Is it consistent? Is it accessible? All those things. And finally, most importantly, right, it is important to understand how would you evaluate the success metrics, because it is not like standard software which works on a rules-based methodology, right? There are a lot of randomness sometimes to some of these outputs. So it is important to clearly know what your success metrics are, so then you can evaluate the right ROI based on are you achieving the right level of output and what type of savings or revenue gains that you're seeing.
I apologize. I realized I was jumping forward to the polling question. I mean, what are you guys seeing at Akram?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. As Ashmita as well covered about the technical aspects of this, the firms of different size would be starting with. But I would just say about the use case of our own firm, in which we have just started up with introducing of AI into the firm. So what we went through is like need assessment, first of all, that what we needed, like what is the requirement, like if you want to automate our processes, or we want to ease out our work, we need to increase our productivity or what. And then the cost versus benefits, definitely this comes the next thing, that how much you are putting in, then how much you get out of it. So that's the second thing we evaluated. And then what will be the impact on overall ecosystem of our business? What will be the impact on the employees? What will be the impact on your working timings? What will be the impact on how much clients we can process in a month or in a due time? Then definitely ROI is one of the main concerns. Then dependability as compared to the cost, like human factor is always kind of mustang in audit and tax. So in that can we trust the system? Can we trust AI to deliver something which is trustable? So after going through all the things, the next thing comes in, like that are you going to buy something to deploy in your firm, or you are going to use something like as a software as a service from somebody, or you want to build something of your own. So after evaluating, after going all through all of these, Akram Associates have come to like a two-stage solution for AI, in which, you know, short term and long term. And in short term, what we have done is that streamlining processes. Well, like in short term, we are covering streamlining processes, improving accuracy by, you know, developing smart AI solutions in which document analysis for relevant data extraction from text documents, automated processes for of files and forms to prepare tax returns, and then tally results, human versus machine, and then, you know, speed of output. So based on all these things, we have like evaluated the things which I covered earlier. And the short terms, we have decided that we'll be working on these things, for which we'll develop small little you know, softwares to assist us in doing the routine work. And in the long term, to develop a complex tax and audit ecosystem where all processes that include like accounting, bookkeeping, tax research, tax return preparation, and document review all are like AI assisted, and human can focus on higher value tasks of like advisory work. Besides that, the second long term would be that uh, the establishment of AI-based contact center to register clients and to respond to them. That's how like Akram Associates is looking towards establishing an AI-based solution for its own, you know, working. And definitely it is expected that with this deployment, with this workout, it is going to assist us to gain, you know, enhanced performance by 30-40% in the initial phase.
Thanks for that. I mean, I'll just add my 2 cents into here, where a lot of this has been a function of time as well, and the quality of the tools and models in which have been rolled out. I think the earlier adopters were some of the larger firms that could afford to take shots in the dark and as Ashmita said, have the hammer and then look for the nail and try things out and see what breaks and what doesn't, what works and what doesn't. I think with the evolution of a lot of the tools that are coming out, as well as and they're becoming much more accessible, right? Even think of Copilot of Microsoft as they're rolling this out, ChatGPT, right? It's made it much more accessible for different size firms to look and see how exactly they can apply this new technology to their current environment without having the $1 million plus to tens of $1 million of investment that was needed prior to do it, and hiring the multiple data scientists. But with that, let's go on to our first poll, which everybody drum roll please, even though you saw it a little bit earlier. What is the reason your firm has not implemented AI yet?
Sorry,
The choices
Sean,
are.
I don't think we see your screen yet. Maybe it's just me.
Did it not come through yet?
I can't see it yet either.
Okay,
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that little technical glitch. Okay, so the polling is now open. So what is the reason why your firm has not implemented AI? You'll see the reasons why there. We'll give it a minute or so to get the responses. Wow, we have a pretty good duality coming in here. Okay, so I'll give you a quick interim. About halfway through of people voted. We have just about even between not knowing how to use it and our company already uses it, which is pretty, I would say, pretty consistent with what we're seeing on the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think here AI refers to everything, right? It's not just generative AI, but any form of machine learning that you have employed. Yeah.
Okay, so we are a minute in, and so we're almost at a dead heat. Well, let's close the poll there. Dead heat between not knowing how to use it and then our company already uses it. So I guess the question is, as we mentioned before we get into slide 3, Any thoughts on that, guys? Is that pretty consistent with what you're seeing across the board? Amber, is that what you're seeing within your client base and your colleagues?
That's fair. And I would say too that as time goes on, it seems that usage tends to increase just in general in our client base, at least.
Okay. All right, good. All right, well, why don't we jump in? So now, as Ashmita mentioned, that was everything. Let's now talk about the new technology on the block, or well, I guess not really new. It's a couple of years now. When your firm and when we look at generative AI, right? What should we consider from a cybersecurity? Obviously, everybody hears the horror stories of people dumping very confidential information into ChatGPT and then either losing their job or getting severely punished for that. But what else? What should we think about? And Amber, or sorry, I mean, why don't we start with you, since you're our cybersecurity expert?
Yeah, so for generative AI, data is the core thing around which the generative AI builds up. And any exposure to offline's data, may it be direct or indirect, like inferences, will lead to compliance issues. And leveraging generative AI safely requires a thoughtful approach that considers not only its capabilities, but also the ethical, privacy, and security implications. Most prominent considerations for cybersecurity perspective are like no personal or sensitive information should be exposed to the ChatGPT. So for that reason, data security and provisioning of data sets for model training without critical or actual identities, which itself will require some AI or automation. And then robust access control over the data, that is very important, because once it is not only the authorized person can access the data, it is available for others also. So restricted controls over the AI system as well as the data reduces the risk of its exposure or access to or breaches or access to unauthorized persons. Similarly, not just the data is important, but the development process itself is very important. Like implementing secure development practice and monitoring system is crucial, to safety leveraging generative AI. And in that, like secure coding practices are essential to avoid vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities and defend against cyber attacks. And for that reason, patches and assessment of systems, assessment of design, and software coding is very important part of it. So besides, algorithms should be in place to detect nefarious activities with feedback loops for monitoring for monitoring purposes, to address security breaches and unnecessary use or unauthorized use of AI systems. So overall, if you see that the importance of data and access to data are two important factors which are to be looked in from cybersecurity point of view. And as generative AI learns, so any inferences of clients' data or individuals' data it becomes a compliance issue or law issue. So for that reason, those are the most important points from cybersecurity perspective.
Great
Amber,
points.
would you mind sharing your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. Well, and I agree with those points. We get this question from clients a lot, and we do recommend treating any sort of AI tool like you would another vendor. So you want to review that vendor before you use the vendor, certainly before you upload any sensitive or proprietary information, and assess the cybersecurity controls. That might be reviewing the vendor's SOC report, for example. ChatGPT has a SOC report, and a lot of other commonly used platforms do as well. So check for that, look for policies and procedures, look for insurance, and question those practices. Look at the privacy controls in place for that vendor and ensure that you're comfortable with those controls depending on how you're planning to use the platform. So if you're using it for potentially drafting an email, for example, no confidential information is planned to be shared, that vendor would likely be reviewed much differently than a vendor that you could potentially be using to determine trades or to assess research. So take a risk-based approach in completing these reviews. And keep privacy top of mind as your use case evolves over time and as the vendor provides additional AI add-ins. Previously, it seemed that you would have to pay for AI to be added to a platform, but we're seeing as time goes on that it's more commonly added or potentially even included in a vendor platform. And so that's another key consideration to keep in mind.
Let me just add a few more things. Although these are like very important things, and any firm has to like look into cybersecurity aspect, but looking into cybersecurity aspect itself is a complex issue. Any firm having not having any cybersecurity specialist in the firm, as employee, a firm normally cannot look into the cybersecurity issues, cannot assess the access controls, cannot assess like how the data has been stored or how it has been accessed. So for that reason, any firm which is going to implement AI has to have some kind of cybersecurity organization within the firm so that they can like respond to that well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, thank you guys for that. Appreciate that from the cybersecurity point. Why don't we continue on, because this is a very key important piece as well. Amber, can you talk us through of the regulatory aspects and what we should be considering when we're looking at implementing AI in our organizations?
Of course. So the obligations will vary by jurisdiction. So the first step is understanding the legal and regulatory landscape. For example, the EU adopted an AI Act, and Colorado also passed an AI Act, and that will go into effect February of next year. The SEC has not adopted regulation that governs AI usage. As you might remember, the SEC did propose the predictive data analytics rule a while back, and that rule was slated for a rewrite under the prior administration. So we'll see what, if anything, happens under this administration in terms of that rule. But regardless, advisors are fiduciaries, and as a fiduciary, there's an expectation that firms are protecting sensitive client information. And so AI usage presents some potential risks to maintaining data confidentiality and privacy. So usage should be incorporated in firms' policies and procedures and compliance programs.
Makes perfect sense. The one piece I'd also add, just from a service provider perspective, right? And I know you talk about advisors, realize whenever our clients provide us or hand over any data to us, we have as much obligation as they do for these type of regulations as well. So we need to take this as serious and consider everything that the advisor would as when we're building out our policies and procedures.
That's a great point, and I could not agree more. Anything that we're recommending to clients, we're also implementing ourselves. I think that's an important consideration. So in terms of where do you start with policies and procedures, there's a lot to consider. Start with customizing it to fit your firm's needs and also to account for the applicable regulations. So let's assume that you're just here in the US and you've got some flexibility since the SEC hasn't formalized any specific requirements yet, although I will note we have seen AI-related requests and exams. Also consider how your firm is using AI, because you want to ensure that you're able to follow the policy, and at the same time, you want to make sure that it's designed to successfully protect client and sensitive firm information. To get an idea of how your firm is using AI, we recommend potentially doing a survey and also checking your firm's network activity to see what platforms are being used. Oftentimes firms will assume, oh, nobody's using AI at the firm, and then if you go and pull an internet log, you will realize that there are people who are using AI platforms. A survey is another great way to collect that data. As part of the policy, we would recommend including a few key components. First, vendor due diligence, as we talked about earlier. Establish a process for how employees can request new vendors and who's responsible for reviewing those vendors and approving them. Establish acceptable uses of AI and prohibited uses of AI. And that should also include what types of data can be used on those platforms, how it can be used, and any sort of restrictions that your firm might want to implement. Establish a process to test the output. So you want to make sure that you're putting in as Ashmita mentioned, clean data, and you also want to check for clean output. And so have a testing process in place. And depending on how you're using the AI tool, that testing review might look different depending on the use case. But if it's used for a low risk activity, like an email draft, for example, or potentially to release a summary for a marketing or sales email, potentially, that could be reviewed for reasonableness. Versus if you're using it for a high risk activity like trading, then you would want to have a really thorough review process in place and pull in somebody that's a subject matter expert from your trading team or portfolio management team. Establish a training process. This is a really important note too, because it's something that is continuous. You certainly want to have an onboarding process when you're rolling it out, as well as when new employees are joining the firm, but also sending periodic reminders as new AI platforms become available. And once you adopt that policy, I would recommend having an all hands meeting to train employees and answer any questions.
One of the best advice that I've heard from a IP lawyer, and especially this was at the beginning when certainly ChatGPT came out, and they're asking them, how do we draft a policy around this? How do we control this? And one of the best advices that I take away from that, and I recommend to our clients as well as internally, is it's key to create, and Amber, you're 100% right with this. Obviously, the policy is important, but realize that is going to age and be obsolete almost to the point where it's actually submitted and taught to everybody because of the new technologies coming out, the new use cases, and everything that we've been talking about. And it's really important to create a committee or some type of framework in which you're periodically bringing in the key stakeholders within the firms and actually making sure that you're up to speed. Somebody is monitoring what's going on out there, how people are using the data and going through. So definitely keep that in mind and make sure that you come back and revisit these policies very quickly and ensure that, and how you're going to measure that when you implement them across the firm.
Completely agree. And we get that question a lot: who should oversee this program and ensure compliance? Sometimes people assume that it's just compliance, and not necessarily always the case, especially at larger firms. I think it's important to include a variety of people. And in terms of key stakeholders, it's going to depend on how the firm's using the tool and what types of tools are being used, but it would typically include a variety or a group of people, and that would include someone from the compliance and or legal team, and they would typically be included to review how the product's being used, what type of data is being input. We're also seeing AI terms in agreements, and I expect that trend to continue, so you might need to coordinate with your legal team to check for any contractual obligations.
And I think on adding to what Amber said, at Linedata, we are also including stakeholders from the different lines of businesses, right, who are the users of these tools, because they would know what this tool is being used for. So you have representation from legal, technology, HR, compliance, right, and the business side.
That's a great point. And I do think it's important to include a subject matter expert when the use case calls for it. And then also, to Hamid's point earlier, pull in cybersecurity experts, because this is a very specific case, and it might be that you need a cyber expert to help with the implementation and the oversight process. Whether that person is internal or external, you definitely need someone who is well versed in cybersecurity.
Okay. You're doing such a great job, Amber. Let's stay on this. So from the perspective, right? I think so. Just the next one, right? Like I was saying, how you measure it, how do you make sure, right? Who are you seeing as the best person to oversee it? Is it compliance? Where does this role kind of sit in that governance of it?
It's typically a group of people And that would include compliance, cybersecurity, and a subject matter expert, as well as legal. And in terms of policy compliance, yes, compliance is typically heavily involved in that as well.
Okay.
Also,
Great.
you might
Well,
have people from your vendor due diligence team, which will bring us to the next slide. So, how do you conduct a due diligence review, and what are some things that you should consider? Cybersecurity is certainly a top consideration, and that would entail requesting a SOC report, for example. You would also want to consider what services are being provided by that AI provider or AI platform, and think through the confidentiality and privacy implications of the data being input into that system. Be sure that you understand the difference between how the AI platform processes information and the resources that are being used to avoid inadvertently sharing that information that's being put into the platform.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right. Next polling question. What regulatory or legal issue are you most concerned about regarding AI? And we'll give about a minute just to see how everybody answers. All right. All right. So now we are just about halfway through. 45. You can imagine privacy concerns is running away with it, almost two-thirds of the respondents.
We have heard from our clients practically every point here that's on the poll. It has come up in some form or the other. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. Okay, so 2 more seconds, guys. All right, we close the poll. All right, yeah, so just so as you know, privacy concerns definitely came in number 1. And I think we spoke about all the different criteria before it, so maybe we influenced it, but I would agree with that. Okay. So this is one of the questions that I typically have all the time is, okay, right? Every time my CTO comes to me, it seems like there's a new model that he wants to go try and figure out. And also DeepSeek was just announced, right? They have a new model out there. So I guess, Ashmita, if you could just take us through, how do we make sense of it? How do we compare one model to another? And then, right, how exactly does anybody have any idea of which one to use?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. So from a understanding perspective, the generative AI models, I assume that's what we're talking about, they come in two forms, right? There are open source models like your one from Meta or Mistral, or even Google has some. These are available for you, for organizations to download and securely install in an isolated and a private environment. And the second category are more closed source models, like the ones ChatGPT types, which are through an API, in which you don't control it, but it is through an API-based service wherein whether it's in the form of a chat interface, like even the co-pilots, right? Where you just ask questions, feed in your data, and it will generate a response based on that. And both of these models have pros and cons, and they come with their own limitations, right? So what we advise clients when they are considering between these, what type of model to use and what makes more sense, it depends on a few things. For example, the most important is the data. What data would you be feeding into the model? And typically where it is very sensitive data, we recommend using open source models, because then you have more control over it, because you know the data will remain in your private environment and will not leave that premise. Whereas if it's not so sensitive and you're okay to use either enterprise chat GPT or even Azure OpenAI or through AWS Bedrock environments, then perhaps go with that. But that being said, even the cloud providers these days are providing all sorts of security and privacy guidelines to say that if you, even through Azure or through AWS, the data through an enterprise version or a client-specific environment and account, the data will remain secure. Second thing to consider when looking at the models is because there are bigger models and smaller models, right? And we hear about models being, billions of parameters of size. So things that you would probably look at are speed versus accuracy, cost versus performance, or scalability versus feasibility, right? Smaller models will be more faster, but at the cost of being more accurate. Likewise, they will be cheaper to run. They can be installed, maybe open source in your environment, but the performance may be impacted. And likewise, from when we look at the scalability, there is a difference between small versus large. So I think all these factors, what we advise clients is point to the data requirements and the use case, right? If you are really worried about the accuracy and performance, maybe go with the larger model compared to the smaller. But if those are not such practical considerations, then perhaps a smaller model may be okay. And also to think about are the budget, right, and the task complexity. So again, smaller models may be cheaper to use, larger not so much. So combination of these factors is what we typically look at when coming up with what's the right configuration and the infrastructure and the environment models.
Sorry about that. I had a little delay there. Amber, any thoughts that you have on selection or what you advise clients?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. We always start with understanding how the information that is being input into the tool will be used and thinking through the privacy considerations there. One thing to note is free versions are typically using the data that's being input. So if you're using a free product, just assume that's the case and educate employees on the risks of using products like that. And make sure that everybody's aware that it's possible that data that's entered will be provided in an answer to another prompt in the future by someone externally. And other considerations, I think, depend on the firm. So we always recommend starting with what are the most repetitive tasks at your firm that you want to automate. Don't try to do everything at once. Take a really narrow focus and look at repetitive tasks that you can automate and get a high value for creating that automation. When we're going through testing and looking at various models, one tip too that I would say would be if you're creating something and you're working on a prompt, use the same prompt and test it over various models and compare the outputs to see what matches the results that you would expect and hope to see.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I'll add to that, Amber, that's a great point. Just one more thing here, John, is again, as you said, these models are coming up with such high frequency that a CTO is always tempted to say, oh, I want to change I'm using this model right now, I want to change and test new one. Our recommendation in those scenarios is why break it if something is working well? So if you already have a model working for you perfectly fine for whatever use case or task, then run with it, right? Don't try to change it unless something is wrong with it.
Absolutely.
No, perfect. One thing I would, and I apologize, I'm remiss. If anybody on has any questions, there is a question segment in your dashboard. And you can add that question, and we'll carve out a little time at the end, and we'll answer those questions. We'd love to answer your questions. So if you want to enter those as we go forward, that'd be great. But we get to ask you a question now. So third of our four polling questions, has your firm tested out new AI software in the past few months? I can answer yes, since Ashmita is here, and I know that she's always testing out new things. while we wait for the polls, I mean, one quick question for you, if you would know, and I apologize putting you on the spot, but are you looking at external versus internally built?
Yeah, that's we are looking at like developing our own
Okay.
because it's kind of like something which is a need of time. So since as Amber was saying that you need to see what all tasks you have to automate for like for the productivity thing. So we have analyzed a few things that we need to first automate a few processes so that our processing time is reduced, our productivity is increased, and that's what I said in the short term thing. So for such a things, we have evaluated that for our tax and auditing tasks, we don't have to do a lot of things. We don't need a lot of resources to do that. So for that reason, we are processing, or we are going towards an approach in which we are developing our own thing. And since it's kind of a thing that we are expanding, and we are like expanding not in the terms of business, but we are expanding in terms of our locations also. So for that reason, we are developing something which is unique to ourselves, and definitely it is going to assist us in a better way, and definitely later on, once we are mature, than the industry also.
Perfect. Thanks for that. So now with that, we'll close the polls, and not surprising, it was a very narrow 53 to 47. Yes, people have been testing out new AI software. I'm sure everybody's interested in it. That's the reason why I want to come here. But I think that is what we're seeing across the board, where I think about half of our client base is testing out new things. I think as Dash made this point, some of them are happy with what they are. They're still in the testing phase, so they're not looking at something new at this moment. But I think half of them are always looking for the next thing and trying to figure out, is this model of generative AI more impactful than something that they've had previously, even if it's just simply machine learning.
I think the question must have been like, if somebody is using AI specific to industry. It's kind of like generally, because everybody is using ChatGPT nowadays, and everyone is using somehow AI. So in terms of CPA industry, are we using any specific software related to that or not?
That is a great question. Yeah. That is a great question. Our sixth and final question for the panel that we have here. It's rather long, but I think it's important, right? So let's break up into two parts. One is, right, what challenges have we faced and overcome, or maybe not? Maybe they still persist in 25, but in 24, looking backwards. And then, is there anything from those struggles or from those obstacles that we had that we've improved our best practices and things that people should consider as we start moving into 25? Amber, why don't you get us kick started from that one?
Sure. So initially, there seemed to be a really steep learning curve, and one common challenge that we saw in the industry, firms were not aware, or maybe specifically individuals were not aware of how data was used for training purposes, and weren't aware of some of the privacy concerns. So that was a high risk that we saw. And then I would also say too, just in terms of use case, figuring out what makes the most sense for a firm. There's so many options out there in the marketplace right now that firms can be overwhelmed with options and either try to onboard a lot of new AI vendors at the same time and potentially have overlap in the services, or not fully recognize the benefits of a platform.
That makes perfect sense. How about you, Ashmita?
Yeah, I mean, as Amber mentioned, definitely there is a lot of upside to using these technologies, these tools, there definitely are challenges, especially the uncertainty around the output, right? A lot of firms are experimenting. The tools are there that have made it very easy that you don't have to be a data scientist or a fairly technical person now to use AI. But with that comes, as we say, with great power comes great responsibility, right? The firms also have to make sure that there are that the accuracy, making sure the results are being validated. And a lot of the way these models are now being trained, the large language model especially, is on the publicly available data. And a lot of this data is synthetically generated also, right? So it becomes like, a cycle to say the models are being trained on genuine data or synthetic data, and how to make sure the accuracy of the data is there. So the important thing that we always recommend, that we also apply internally at Linedata, is to always have a human in the loop, right? Yes, these models are great, and use them as your, assistant or as an intern, so to say, that will help you make your job a little more faster, easier. But then the final decision making, or to validate whether it's correct or not, ultimately rests with a human.
And I'll add a few things to that. As I look across, and certainly 24 was a great example. Many of people, or many of my clients, have already implemented their first 2-3 versions of it. And a lot of the hallucinations that people will throw out there, because that's the reason why they won't use it, what they're starting to dig into as they get to the root cause, it's because of their data practices and what the legacy data stack that they've had. So make sure, as you go through this, make sure it's a process. One is, if you have inconsistent data throughout your organization, and any organization that is out there more than 5 years, I'd say probably more than 2, probably has data that's stored in multiple different tables, that has multiple different uses, and that had different names to it. And if that's the case, and if you're starting to utilize these type of engines to query, to pull, to predict, it's going to give you different aspects of it depending on how you ask the question, because your data is your architecture for your data structure is inconsistent across the board. So that's one of probably the first thing of it. And then I would echo, right, Ashmita's perspective of the human in the loop. It's not going to be perfect right now, but again, a lot of the things that we're seeing, we're still at, like I said, we're probably at the prediction level of 70 to 75%. While this is a black box, it's not meant right now because of where we're at. The models will improve. They're teaching themselves. It's going to get better. But for right now, realize nothing's going to be 100%. You need to check. You need to verify, and you need to have the right expectation as you roll this out. Because at 75% prediction, like I said, I'm still gaining about 30 to 35% efficiency, which is, depending on the size of the firm, can be a pretty big deal, and certainly beneficial to the overall piece of it. Any other thoughts on that before we go into the last? Just trying to apologize. I think we've set this one up from best practice.
So
anything else, Amber, you want to highlight?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Amber.
please go ahead, Ashmi.
No, just the thought came to my mind around the recommendation part is and this is something we've heard from many of our clients in terms of their challenges. John, you mentioned that too, right? A lot of people are experimenting, but going from a POC to production is not always 100% success, right? And so one of the factors, so data is absolutely one in any area which requires the most effort, but another aspect that especially small to mid-sized firms deal with are the skill level within the organization. Do they have the right skill set and the budget to maintain the infrastructure, maintain it, and sort of scale it up based on as the needs expand within the user base? So working with a partner who is more experienced from a technology standpoint to make sure that, and those who have done it multiple times, to make sure that you have the right level of infrastructure, you have the right level of skills to do the right DevOps, maintain it, run it, and the extent, the scalability, the security, and the extensibility, right? Those are the very important factors that also go into making sure that they run without error consistently in a production day by day.
Okay.
Great point. And just adding on that too, I think ways to mitigate some of that privacy risk is keeping your compliance program up to date by utilizing a lot of the tools that we talked about today, policies and procedures, oversight and testing, training, and conducting a thorough due diligence review, cybersecurity evaluation on any platforms that are being used, and then have an oversight process to make any changes based on legal or regulatory changes, as well as your own firm's use case changes.
Perfect. Okay, with that, I'm just conscious of time so we can open up for questions. Last polling question, 404. Do you think you'll be using AI more in 2025 than you are in 2024? With that, we'll open up the polls and see how we do.
If we can predict, it'll be yes.
I definitely vote yes.
Agreed.
I can tell you right now, Copilot is now my new best friend. I've been utilizing that quite a bit.
I think with the big tech releasing these new tools, you know, they are in the face of you everywhere, so you cannot avoid them.
That's true. That is true. All right, we'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Let everybody have a chance to vote. Okay, and I'll just a last reminder, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If not, Joe, you'll have to help me out if there is anybody who wants to step up and ask us questions on an audio basis. I think we can do that. Don't quote me that. All right, so now closed. Guess what? 100% people think that are going to spend more AI, spend more time in AI, which is hopefully that's what we're here for. That's where we all think it's going to go. Okay, we do have one question. Amber, I'll get you started with this one. What are the key tasks that managers are leveraging AI for? What are you seeing?
We've seen a variety of use cases by clients. A few of the more common use cases that we're seeing is using AI to summarize research for clients. We've also seen usage for summarizing a large volume of agreements, whether it's leases or private fund agreements potentially. And we've also seen clients use, I would say this is probably the most common use case, is to maintain meeting minutes. And that, I will say too, that it requires a thoughtful approach to ensure that the firm's addressing any legal and regulatory considerations, as well as books and records considerations.
Ashmita, I know you have some use cases that you've been helping out with, of particular clients who you might want to share some,
Sure,
some
yeah,
of those interesting ones.
Absolutely, yeah, and I completely agree with Amber. You know, what the use cases she has mentioned, that those are definitely everybody is using them, Gen AI for getting information out of your proprietary knowledge base, right? That is the most common thing I also hear, where they're applying some sort of RAG, as we call it, retrieval augmented generation techniques on top of your Gen AI models to make sure you have the more contextual responses. That being said, there are also a lot of automation-based use cases that we are seeing. For example, a lot of our institutional and private asset management clients have to deal with the compliance mandates from their investors. And maintaining those, reading those, hundreds of pages of documents and ensuring that they've captured the right set of guidelines from those documents is a very time-consuming task. So a very common and highly asked for use case that we're working on and being asked is, how can we automate the extraction? Again, comes to extraction of the relevant guidelines, and then applying some sort of AI or rules-based technology to then do the right assignment in the compliance system. So make sure you've got the right rules that deal with those sort of guidelines, whether it's what they're allowed to invest in or what they're restricted to invest in kind of thing. So that's an area, again, that's very popular, and we're seeing a lot of interest within our client base.
Yeah, Amit, would you like to opine on it?
Yeah. So for now, like most of the firms or inside our firm also, like ChatGPT and other AI solutions are being used for documentation, preparing, summarizing documents and preparing agreements, kind of like making, paragraphs and scripts well for the clients, and then finding out solutions to work out formulas for, calculating things which are for, difficult in terms of like complex, and then, getting assistance from the AI for knowing all those formulas to solve the problem. Then knowing latest compliance and laws summaries, like what is going on nowadays, like what new changes have been done to the compliance or laws. So, it's kind of like getting a small little thing, and then knowing that nothing has changed or something has changed, so that you can follow the rules.
Thanks for that. With that, I'm conscious of the time. I want to take the time to thank everyone out there for joining us. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to share our points of view. Thank you so much, Hamid, Ashmita, and Amber for joining us today and providing your insights. Thank you for Akram for the opportunity to do this, and looking forward to future webinars with everybody. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.